you. And a lot of people, I think, feeling like Paul and pretty blooming angry out there. Now, somebody else who's angry is Theresa May. She is really unhappy and unusually with a former Prime Minister. You see, Tony Blair, who keeps shuttling back and forth to Brussels, meeting Juncker and Barnier, other heads of state. He wants a second referendum. And the Prime Minister has said that actually it's an insult to the office he once held and the people he once served, namely us. Is Theresa May right to criticise Tony Blair in these terms? 0345 6060 973, text to 84850, tweet using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC, watch us on Facebook and comment there too. Well, a very tough week for Mrs May. You know, emotion of confidence vote held in her 37% of her own party in the House of Commons, expressing no confidence in her leadership. Off to Brussels, where she could reasonably have expected just a little bit of help from a group of people to whom she's given absolutely everything, and she got nothing back. She got pretty much abused by Jean-Claude Juncker, although he does that pretty much to everyone, really. And she has a little bit of a tetchy debate with him. But she really saved most of her comments for Tony Blair. Now, let's have a listen to Tony Blair on Friday speaking on the BBC.
This is becoming such a big mess that it's obvious that Parliament here is at some point going to have to grip it. It's then going to have to run the different options, and there are different options. Her deal, a form of Norway, a form of Canada, or if there's no majority for any of those things...
What about leaving?
Then you can go back to the people in a further referendum.
Jolly good.
And, you know, at some point the government is going to have to understand that facilitating that is actually its duty. Because if you don't do that, it would be absurd if Britain crashed out of the European Union without a deal in circumstances where the overwhelming majority of people don't want a no-deal scenario, and when obviously if you come to a choice between a referendum and no deal, it's clear whatever the British people voted for in June 2016, they didn't vote for crashing out of the European Union without a deal.
Tony Blair is the colluder-in-chief. He has spent much of the time in the last couple of years going back and forth, meeting Mr Barnier, meeting other heads of state, meeting other European commissioners, and he is absolutely dead set on keeping us part of the European Union. He is the ultimate globalist. He at one point, of course, himself wanted to become president of the European Union. I think his constant meddling, I find it offensive in every way, but perhaps he is in fact in many ways the great card, could say trump card, of the leavers if we are forced into a second referendum. And if it's seen that Blair is one of those people that has pushed us there, that will help the Leave vote again, if, of course, that's the option we're given. He doesn't even want to give us that. Well, Mrs May, too, is unhappy with him, and she says for Tony Blair to go to Brussels and seek to undermine our negotiations by advocating for a second referendum is an insult to the office he once held and the people he once served. And for once, folks, I am going to take 100% and support Mrs May on this. When you're the government and you're doing a job of negotiation, whatever your own intentions are, you shouldn't be undermined by your own side. But it's been happening, hasn't it? Not just Blair, but the Adonises, the Cynic Cleggs, back and forth to Brussels, all working together, all initially trying to keep us trapped inside the customs union, now all trying to make it so impossible for Mrs May that they force a second referendum. Is Mrs May right to condemn Tony Blair? I think she is. I really, truly think she is. Enough of this meddling. I wonder what Roger, a new caller from Bodmin in Cornwall, thinks about Mr Blair's statements. Roger, good morning.
Good morning. Regarding Mr Blair, I think, ironically, he actually created Brexit with his policies for his term, as PM. He created Brexit.
Well, by opening up the doors unconditionally to 10 new member states of the European Union. He certainly did, Roger, yes.
Yes. However, I feel, we're having many little marches in London and all this thing going on, and the media generally play down anything that's pro-Brexit. I think that we need to have something far bigger. And I feel Trelawney's army back in the 1600s marched on London from Cornwall.
They did.
And I think Trelawney's army should rise once again. I actually sent you a message this morning, ironically. But Trelawney's army should march once again from London to Cornwall. Probably a week, 10 days it would take for us to march.
I think actually, Roger, I think Cornwall. I think Cornwall to London would be more appropriate. But Roger, are you talking about peaceful protest here, or are you talking about?
Absolutely, yes. No,
okay.
No, absolutely. It has to be a peaceful protest, and I think you'd gather massive support along the way. And I would hope that we could have people coming from the north and the southeast and across the country to all merge in London.
And then maybe, Roger, when you arrive in London, Tony Blair could come to meet you, couldn't he?
I'd love that. I've got a few choice words to say about him.
I bet you have. It's Sunday morning, Roger. Enough's enough. Roger, thank you very much indeed. Mark's a new caller from Great Offley in Hertfordshire. Good morning.
Good morning, Nigel. Yeah, well, I think we can come to the conclusion that while Theresa May is losing the argument, she has to revert to personal insults and mudslinging and scraping the bottom of the barrel. And what is even more disgusting is she aims at Blair, but not a word about John Major.
Wow.
Even a Conservative Prime Minister
now
who is saying exactly the same.
That's a very, very good point, Mark, because Major's interventions in this debate have been gearing up and up and up to the point where he said just a few days ago we should simply revoke Article 50, cancel Brexit. I mean, he wasn't even talking about second referendum, just cancel Brexit is what Major was saying. So, Mark, I think you've got a very, very good point. If she's going to have a go at Blair, she ought to have a go at Major. But there's one difference, Mark. There's one difference, and it's this. John Major, despite what he said, and I think it's appalling, but John Major has not been running a sort of shuttle service back and forth between this country and Brussels. Tony Blair has.
Well, I think you're underestimating what Mr. Major is capable of and his contacts throughout Europe. I mean, previous prime ministers keep their network, and I'm sure maybe less in private he's been doing something like that. But Nigel, I mean, you talked about revoking Article 50.
Yeah.
I found that quite interesting because I'm a little bit intrigued about what you've been saying this morning, and in particular, you seem to have this thing against representative parliamentary democracy.
When it no, Mark, I'm all for it, but when it decides on a crucial constitutional issue that it will give that decision to the people, and it reinforces at every level that whatever decision the people take, it will be enforced and it will be carried out, then Mark, it jolly well should be, shouldn't it?
Yeah, but hang on, Nigel, hang on. As you should well know by now, the referendum was advisory.
No, Mark, constitutionally, that is right, but we were told in a government document, we were told by all the major parties, you decide and we will implement. And that, I think, was a promise that was made, not just in the referendum, but in the general election too. And that's what matters, Mark. This is a matter of trust, isn't it?
Hang on. First of all, let's go back to the leaflet. Let's put that into context, Nigel. That was a promise made by a government. It overstood the mark because it wasn't their promise to make, because as we have found out, Parliament is sovereign. It is down to Parliament.
Mark,
no, hang on, Nigel. Let me have my answer to it.
Do you really think that the public out there thought that the referendum was purely advisory? Do you really believe that?
Well, no. What I believe, Nigel, is I believe because we entrust our vote to our MP in a representative parliamentary democracy, because most people haven't got a Scooby-Doo about representative parliamentary democracy or our constitution, that people have found that crack and started feeding in propaganda. So they're trying to make out this was a direct democracy exercise which was enforceable in law, which of course it wasn't. You've had plenty of Tory MPs say, well, it's a bit debatable.
So should we just scrap it, Mark? Should we just scrap voting altogether, really? I mean, just give up on the whole concept of people being involved in anything. I mean, Mark, you can make a constitutional argument, but my point is that our prime ministers and our leaders of both parties told us they would enact what we'd done, and they're not doing it. That's the point, isn't it?
Sorry, as I just said, Nigel, they can say that red is white, but the ultimate decision is the Parliament's. And let me just put that... Now, hang on, Nigel, let me finish now.
I hadn't said anything, but I was. But I tell you what I would say, Mark. Parliament voted for the referendum, and Parliament voted for Article 50. So there's your parliamentary bit as well. What's the problem? So we should leave on March the 29th, surely.
No, what we should do is... I'm going to keep... No, hang on. I understand representative parliamentary democracy.
Well, good for you. Good for you.
Hang on, Nigel.
But what about the average voters who were made a promise? What about... Or don't they count, Mark? Should we just say you're 17.4 million cretins and we don't care what you think?
No, Nigel. Both my father and my brother fought for this country, and they fought against our lifestyle and our democracy system. We do not have a direct democracy system in this country.
We did here.
We haven't had one... Sorry?
We did with this.
No, you did not. Because
all right, Mark, I tell you what, we'll call it a score draw. There's no point going on. We're not going to agree. Mark making the constitutional point that the referendum was advisory. My point is, actually, we were told it was up to us. Frankie, who's called in from Exeter. Frankie, was May right to speak about Blair in these terms?
Absolutely, but I think it is just words. I wish some people would really do something and properly expose these people like Tony Blair, who are pushing this. I know I sound like a far-right conspiracy theorist here, but pushing very much a globalist agenda. I used
the word not 10 minutes ago. Yeah.
Yeah, I think he is very much almost still running the country. When he's not just...
Well, he thinks he is.
He's not just going back and forth from the EU. He's still influencing Britain's relationship with countries in the Middle East after the disaster that was the Iraq War. And I think his
peace envoy, wasn't he? He was a peace envoy.
Yeah.
I thought it was a joke
all people,
when I first heard it.
War criminal.
Well, that's a matter of opinion. Frankie, you still think the man has enormous influence, yeah?
Absolutely. I think it's there in the civil service and across the public sector as well. I think this obsession with political correctness, with identity politics, with diversity very much started under Tony Blair. And we need to expose this and tackle it, and other people like him.
Frankie, you're a younger voter, are you?
Absolutely. I voted Green in the council elections, but I am a Brexiteer.
Right. I voted Green once. I voted Green in... I did. The 1989 European elections. They were run by a bloke called Jonathan Porritt, who I thought was really rather sensible. I was always a bit of an environmentalist, and I voted Green, and I'm a Brexiteer too. Frankie, lovely to talk to you. Call us again. You're listening to a Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC, and it's 11:15. Blair will do anything to stop a true clean Brexit. Theresa May slaps him down. Was she right to do so? And I only have to mention Tony Blair, and the switchboard sort of lights up and starts flashing like a Belisha beacon. He is somebody who attracts still great passion. Nice one, Blair. Keep plodding on. You are helping us levers every time you open your mouth. As I say, he could be our trump card. Before I get back to that story, the sort of comedy moment of the morning, the one story I saw that made me laugh out loud was on page 2 of the Sunday Times. Home Secretary Sajid Javid bids to slash EU immigration by 80%. Oh, come on. Please, pull the other one. It's got bells on it. We keep hearing this rot, don't we? He's going to cut the numbers down to something like 10,000 a year. I mean, it's just not going to happen. It's all rubbish. They tell us this in the 2010 election, the 2015 election, the 2017 election. It isn't going to happen with these people. Oh, I suppose I hadn't thought of it. Perhaps he fancies being the next leader. That's right. Just lie to the party membership. Then they might vote for you. Let them down again. I mean, hey, it's just ridiculous. Roy on Facebook says, what's it got to do with Blair? He's just a private individual Remainer with plenty of money and a self-interest. Well, he's pretty well connected, Roy, and as I say, he's been running a sort of shuttle service back and forth between Brussels and London, and who knows, perhaps much of the rest of the world. Sue says, when we leave, Mr. Blair may have to sell one of his many £1 million homes. How awful. William from Newcastle feels quite strongly about this. He says, Blair is a hypocrite who has weakened both Europe and Britain economically and politically. He prevented the euro becoming the currency for trading oil. He also weakened Europe by creating millions of migrants. He created resentment of EU migrants by not capping the acceptance of migrants from new countries. So despite his words, he's actually harmed Europe and is a hypocrite. William, I have to say, I really don't think that Leave would have got anywhere near winning the referendum had it not been for the actions of Mr. Blair. Absolutely. And Bob in Wadhurst, responding to a previous caller, says, was the 1975 referendum advisory? Well done, Bob. It's advisory when it suits, and it's not advisory when it doesn't. But hey, I do not buy this argument. I do not buy this argument that because in normal circumstances, we have a form of representative parliamentary democracy, that referendum in 2016 wasn't valid. I don't buy it, and I'm guessing 80-90% of the country would not buy that as an argument. Oliver is a new caller from Derby. Good morning, Oliver.
Good morning, Nigel. Thanks for having me on.
Not one little bit. So Mrs. May has really shot back. I mean, actually, if you listen to what she said, Oliver, she says that for Blair to go to Brussels and seek to undermine our negotiations by advocating for a second referendum is an insult to the office he once held and the people he once served. They're very strong words, Oliver, aren't they?
No, they are. I absolutely agree with Mrs. May on that. However, I'm wondering if she's doing it to get, because the British public, we're not fools. I don't want her to use this so she can get us on board with her deal. Do you know what? I think if she went out this afternoon, and ran a sub 4-minute mile, I don't think there's anything. Even if she sort of went out and healed the sick, there's nothing she could do, I think, to convince us to support this deal. So that's not the real. I just think, Oliver, she's had a rotten week, and she probably does deserve to snap back at one or two people. But absolutely. I mean, Tony Blair. I mean, he's a bad smell, isn't he? I mean, he just will not go away. And this is coming from a former Prime Minister who's passed, a lot of legislation without our say so. Through, and I know Gordon Brown did it as well. So I really, again, all he's doing is just building. He was
he was a phenomenally successful politician in his time, wasn't he?
Yeah. Oh no, he was. But I think we became wise to him.
I watched him. I watched him, Oliver. I watched him. I was there in July 2005. He walked into the European Parliament. He'd taken over the 6 months rotating presidency of the European Union. He just won his third election. But he was deeply unpopular in Brussels, chiefly because of the Gulf War decision, which the French did not like, because, of course, they were fairly major trading partners with the Iraqis. And Blair turned up in that parliament, and he stood up and spoke without notes for 40 minutes. He charmed the room. As a performer, he was absolutely brilliant. And we've not seen anybody at the top of our two parties since him with anything like the ability. So he did have something. He had an aura of success about him. But he now looks like I think he now looks like a rather sinister figure.
No, he does. Do you remember? I mean, you won't forget this. Do you remember when he was there at the European Parliament and he said to you, "You do not sit there and represent our country."
Well,
and do you know what? Well,
do you know something? I think, I may be wrong on this, but I think I'm the only person Tony Blair has actually shouted at in public. And it happened because he'd been up negotiating all night. He'd been absolutely stuffed by the French. He'd given away $7 billion of our rebate in return for nothing. Oliver, thanks for the call. Good to chat about old times with Tony Blair. I hadn't intended to. James is a new caller from Kingswood. Good morning, James.
Nigel, hi, good to speak to you.
Good morning. So,
and trust me, just sorry to interrupt, Nigel, before I start. If you're the only person that Tony Blair has ever shouted at in public, trust me, take that as a very, very big compliment.
Well, I'll do my best to, James. He wasn't very happy with me at all. I got to tell you, bags under his eyes,
listen, before
and he was feeling rough.
Tony Blair, let me just ask you one question. Did I actually hear you correctly? Did you just say that Sajid Javid has stated that he's going to bring down migration levels by 80%?
He's going to slash EU immigration by 80%. It may reduce to...
Does he put a timescale on that?
Oh, well, he'll do it. He'll do it 2 weeks.
Does he stipulate a timescale?
No,
does
he doesn't.
Say by when?
No, he doesn't. But he says that basically people coming in will need to earn at least £30,000 a year.
Okay, and does he say that? Does he stipulate that we can hold him to account if that doesn't happen?
Oh,
even
no.
Without a
No, I
timescale?
think it's in the context of this morning's debate. It's just advisory, really. I think is the way that I am sick to death. James, I'm sick to death of being told this rot by politicians who don't even intend to carry it out. It's all to curry favour. No, none whatsoever.
Absolutely.
Right, now look, come on. Back to the point. Is Mrs May right to have used this very, very strong language about Tony Blair?
Yes, she is, and just to start with, I'm no fan of Theresa May, far from it. In fact, very, very far from it. I don't think she should be there. I think she should have gone a long time ago, and I think she's particularly derisory for our Brexit intentions, etc. So I think she should have gone a long time ago. But that said, that doesn't detract from the fact. Sorry, I'm trying to keep a straight face, but I find it very difficult. Every time I mention the two words Tony Blair, I find it difficult to keep a straight face. I think one of the particularly strong points for the entire Brexit movement is every time Tony Blair enters the fray in any way, shape or form, even if his face is simply seen on a magazine or a newspaper picture or on the television, instantly it makes people want to vote in the opposite direction.
Well, no, James,
okay?
I think
completely
you're absolutely right. Yeah.
So for me, he's a fantastic tool for Brexit.
I
my opinion.
I agree. James, I'm going to let you go. I'm going to move on to Bev, a new caller from Fleetwood. Good morning, Bev.
Morning, Nigel.
So is Mrs May right to say... Because Mrs May says she's doing the best for Britain. Well, that's questionable. But she is standing firmly against the second referendum, isn't she?
And I hope that it keeps that way very much. I mean, I've never phoned before, never phoned into anything in my life before, but I just feel so strongly. So it's hard to describe the way I feel over what is happening in our country. For me, and it was a question about May that really triggered me to call. This is the first time that May, that I know, that she has ever spoken out against this now with Tony Blair. And, you know, as far as I'm concerned, about time, well overdue. As far as I'm concerned, this rhetoric and these behaviours now from our politicians that have voted in, that are, for me, going against, well, some of them are doing what they said, but a lot of them have voted in and going against what the people voted them in on. This rhetoric and these behaviours, had they been clamped right in the early days, because we voted, and obviously a big Leave voter, we voted to leave. Very, very clear to me, everyone I know and all them Leave voters out there, what exactly we voted for, as it was for the Remainers. Absolutely crystal clear. It was made clear. All the
How angry, Bev? How angry do you feel? I mean, you know,
I am. At times now, I'm looking. I'm thinking. I want somebody to be standing. Somebody to be fighting for us. This is the first sign of anything that I have seen her do, where she's done that. It's in print in it this morning as well.
Okay,
where she's condemning him now.
Yeah, so you're pleased. You're pleased about it. Good, Bev. I thank you. And of course, Fleetwood, which used to have a huge fishing fleet, and now finds that much of the Irish Sea is full of Belgium and French boats. Real issue, Bev. Thank you for your call and for your passion. And that's what's happening, folks. People who've never engaged before in public meetings or LBC phone-ins are getting involved. You're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC. It's 11:30 and time for the news with Philip Chryssikos. Tony Blair weighs in once again and pushes for a second referendum, says no one voted to leave on WTO rules. Oh, is that right, Mr. Blair? Well, I think a lot of people did vote for a clean Brexit. A lot of people voted to say, good, we just want to be out of this. Mrs May hits back hard, and I'm struggling at the moment, folks, to find any of you to ring up and tell me that Mr Blair has a right to do this. Might it be better if he kept quiet, in your opinion? I don't know. And lots of comment on this and what we discussed in the previous hour. John says to me on Facebook, I think you're great, Nigel, but you're being defeatist. A second referendum is not an option. We've had one and that's it. A lot of people in the 30s, John, said, no. We don't need to listen to that nasty Mr. Churchill. He's awful. He's a warmonger. We've had a war. It's over. There'll never be another one. And there was. And kind of we found ourselves actually pretty ill prepared for it. And my argument to leavers is do not trust our political class. Forcing a second referendum would be the ultimate betrayal, but it's what, John, I think is going to happen. And, hey, if I'm wrong, what have we lost in getting ready and preparing? Because the other side really, really are. Maureen says, with 103 days left to go, I feel we are no closer to leaving the EU than 2 years ago. Does feel a bit like that some days, Maureen, although the legislation is in place. So, talking of Mr. Blair, Ian in Huntingdon is a caller. We've spoken before. Good morning, Ian.
Hello, Nigel. I think Theresa May. It's actually quite nice to see something that at least looks vaguely like passion from her.
Yes, I agree.
I think it's about time. But I think the thing with Tony Blair, what he's doing is almost as good for the Leave camp as if Barack Obama showed up to repeat his entreaties that we should never leave under any circumstances.
Yes,
I think what we've got to remember is that this is Tony Blair's. This is a direct result of many of Tony Blair's actions, right? Not just the open-door immigration policy. I think if you combine open-door immigration with the national minimum wage, with the fact that he constantly failed to understand that an entitlements-based benefit system compared to the contribution-based benefit system in the rest of Europe was always going to suck in a huge number.
Oh, no, come on, Ian. They told us it would lead to an extra 13,000 a year. Do you remember?
Well, yes, and he also told us that he was going to give away some of our rebates to reform the Common Agricultural Policy.
$7 billion.
And I seem to remember he also wanted to join the Euro. Gordon Brown.
Oh, yes.
Thank goodness that stopped him. I mean, Tony Blair has been wrong on almost every major issue that I can think of to do with the European Union. Mm-hmm. The other thing, I think it's a bit rich for Tony Blair to go on about advisory referenda, given that I believe it was him that had the referendum for the Welsh Assembly, which had a majority of 50.9% on a vote of less than 50% of the voting population.
It was 7,000 votes, Ian, wasn't it? Yeah. Yeah.
So I can't imagine. This is. I suspect Tony Blair is actually racked with guilt, and is desperately like the kid who's been offered the part of third tree in the nativity play, is desperately jumping up and down at the back, waving his arms around, saying, "Look at me, look at me."
I like that.
The other thing, while I've got you, if you don't mind me digressing very slightly, the constant whining about just-in-time deliveries. I don't understand why Caroline Lucas, who appears to be campaigning for Remain, isn't saying, well, actually, this is a great benefit from the Green Lobby because we should be buying more things locally.
Locally produced food and goods. I get the point, Ian. Thank you. You made me laugh about the nativity play. That was very, very good. Jean says, who earns 30,000? Because most nurses don't. Javid needs to get into the real world. Well, what are you saying, Jean, is, we will only take, high-skilled, high-earning people, but because it'll never happen, don't worry about it. Don't take it seriously, really. Anyone siding with Blair for a second vote is a traitor to their country. All right, Keith, steady on. It's Sunday morning. Let's go to Steve, a new caller in Kensington. Steve, good morning to you.
Good morning, Nigel.
So the great Blair is intervening. Do you think do you think he's actually doing some good for the debate, or do people just despise him now?
I think he's just a pathological liar.
Oh dear!
He's got absolutely no clout. He took us to a war, and then he shut the door and walked away. I said, but more importantly, I think what's really getting me this morning is as regard the this EU thing.
Yeah.
We are all my life. Okay, I'm just a cab driver. I've hated bullies all my life. My life, and I'm anti-bullying. Anyone who doesn't think that Germany and France are not pulling our pants down in a playground and bullying us is mistaken.
Oh, it's there for all to see, Steve, isn't it? I mean, were you?
It's there to see, and listen. As a country, we're a fantastic country. I voted to remain. I must tell you.
Okay.
But I will vote because of this bullying to leave. And I'll never, ever, if we have another referendum, which would be disgusting, I will vote to leave, and I'll never, ever, ever vote again. Ever.
Steve, thank you for your passion. And by the way, please don't say I'm just a cab driver. I love our cab drivers in London. They're fantastic. Thank you very much indeed for your call. And it is interesting, and perhaps a point to ponder for some on the Remain side, that actually the sheer level of arrogance and bullying and the way they've disrespected the leader of our nation, whoever he or she, doesn't matter, has made a big difference. There are plenty of people out there who think it's just all too much. Tony Blair wants the Brussels top job. Simple as that, Nigel. Happy Christmas from Twickenham. Well, does Tony Blair want to be in charge of Europe? I thought perhaps he had global ambitions. I don't know. Let's go to Manchester and speak to Richard. Good morning, Richard.
Good morning, sir. I'd just like to say about this Blairite thing.
Yeah.
Blair is not a big word with regards to him. The bully boy Campbell, who's probably got an earpiece as we're speaking now and talking about this thing into Blair's ear. And that Lord Adonis, my God, if he comes on and says, I want another referendum, I want another referendum, I want another referendum, that's all he ever says. And he was boasting that he'd been on that march with... I don't know how many people. They said 700,000, but it was never confirmed.
No.
And he'd spoken to at least 3,000 people, and this is his own words, and he now has 3 million followers who are prepared to follow him. That man should not be in the House of Lords, and I hope the Lords are taking this as I'm speaking and think, well...
Well, yeah. Richard, I have twice had Lord Adonis here, sitting opposite me in the studio on Sunday mornings, and I'll get him back on again, and we'll make sure, Richard, that you're fast track through to speak to Lord Adonis and ask questions. And
I'd love to. I'd love to.
No, absolutely. And I tell you what, actually, to be fair to him, he will take your call and answer it. Well, he may not answer it, but he'll take your call and do his best to answer it. Richard, should Blair just pack up and go away?
He won't do that, will he? Now he's got this money. I mean, there's billionaires now coming on saying, we will start a new party. We're sorry about what's happened with all the people. We're talking billionaires. He's rubbish. He's only got a few million in the
bank. Richard, thanks very much indeed. Come on, someone out there tell me that Tony Blair's a top chap and we should listen to him. 0345 6060 973. Never mind a second referendum. I'm still waiting for Blair's first referendum on the EU Constitution. Blair promised us this, says Laurie from Plymouth. He promised it in 2004, in the middle of the European elections. Why? Because UKIP suddenly was hitting into double digits. They all changed their policies and promises because of the rise of the UKIP vote. Mike is a new caller from Lowestoft in Suffolk. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning, Nigel. Well, first of all, Tony Blair, as a private individual, has the right to say what he likes, but by being a former Prime Minister, he no longer occupies that position, so he should be more mindful of what he says and who he says it to.
Yes.
And something that's being missed by a lot of people and a lot of commentators is that at the time of the referendum, which was in fact the second referendum and not the first,
yes,
nobody, absolutely nobody, voted for, year upon year, of prevarication, negotiation or dilution.
Well, I couldn't agree more, Mike. And do you know what? I wish that point was made more often. I really do. Because it took them 9 months to trigger Article 50, a 2-year Article 50 process, a transition period, which she's now basically said will go to the end of 2021, and Barnier said could be the end of 2022. It is pathetic, Mike, isn't it?
Prevarication upon prevarication. And whoever cannot see what the end result is that they're working towards is willingly blind.
No, well, I think that's right. But I also take your point that Blair, as a former Prime Minister, does have a responsibility. I guess in his defence, Mike, he just thinks it's vital to our interests to stay inside the EU. But it's the lack of respect for the vote that gets me.
Yeah. I would never, ever thought I would hear you, Nigel Farage, ex-leader of UKIP, jumping to Tony Blair's defence.
Well, I'm not jumping to his defence, but I'm just trying to say, look, I honestly think, in some ways, he actually helps the Leave side. I really do. I really honestly do. Mike, I thank you. Now, Nick in Kings Lynn says, there are many like myself who are phoning you, wanting to back Blair, Nigel. You are purposely only taking calls from those who want to insult him. No, Nick. Nick, 0345 6060 973. I am looking. Come on. Right. We're going to go to the break in a minute. I then want, Nick, I want you on the phone, and I want pro-Blair people on the phone. We're only taking pro-Blair calls. 0345 6060 973. If we can find them, that is. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC, and the time is now 11:40. 4:45. Theresa May slaps down Tony Blair's intervention, says it actually really does discredit to his office and to the people that he once served. I'm asking whether that's right, and many of you think that May is right to say that, and I think that's absolutely right. So I'm now looking for pro-Blair messages and callers. Oh, Lillian Bolton says he is batting for the nation. Pity it's not our nation. No, sorry, that one doesn't work. Come on, we must... Oh, here we are. Jim says, you don't like Tony Blair being involved because he doesn't agree with you. When Trump is intervening, you love it. Jim, the only reason I support Trump intervening is because Barack Obama did before him. Looking for Blair supporters. Robert is a new caller from Epsom. Good morning, Robert.
Good morning. How are you?
I am very well. Come on, tell me that Blair's doing the right thing.
Well, I think Blair can do what he likes. I think you're always one bleating for democracy, and democracy allows free speech, and
yes.
He's allowed to do what he likes. But I do have a question for you.
Robert, can I just ask you, does that include colluding with Mr Barnier and Juncker and other prime ministers and presidents around Europe, whilst the British elected prime minister is in a negotiation which he, Mr Blair, is undermining? Does he really have the right to do that?
Yeah, I think so, and I would as you would.
No, I don't. I don't think it's right.
You talk of collusion. You talk of collusion. God knows what collusion is going on in the world today.
Right.
But I do have a question for you, if you don't mind.
What, on this subject or on something?
On Brexit.
On Brexit, yeah, go on then.
Well, as far as Theresa May is concerned, I think she's between a rock and a hard place, because whatever she decides or whatever is agreed or whatever is not agreed is not what the population wants. If you were her, how would you handle it from now on in?
I would have got up on Thursday evening and said, I will not, as the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, be spoken to by people like you, least of all the unelected of you in the room. We've tried and tried and tried. I've given and given and given. I came tonight looking just for a little bit of something back. You refused to give it. We are now cancelling this withdrawal agreement. It will not be ratified. We are leaving on World Trade Organization terms on the 29th of March and walked out of the room, which would have led already, Robert, to pressure on Merkel and Macron from German car makers and French wine producers like you can't believe.
Yes, and I would agree with you, and I would agree with the action that you're proposing if you were the Prime Minister. However, the people of this country then need to know how they're going to suffer, because they will, in financial terms.
Why?
On going to a WTO. Look, how long is it going to take to negotiate a WTO agreement?
Well, the rules are there already.
What duties are going to be imposed on us, as well as us imposing on them, Europe? What duties are going to be imposed both ways to keep trade going?
Well, if they Robert, if they charge tariff, we charge tariff. But where I would agree with you, and where we almost certainly probably will still need some form of transition, is all the evidence, Robert, we get is that some within government, such as Liddington, such as the Chancellor, have done their utmost to make sure that our preparations for a negotiated no deal are as pitiful as they possibly can be. And so, we're not in good order. We have not done as much of the work, Robert, as we needed to do. I thank you very much indeed for your call. Right, now Nick texted me from King's Lynn. Nick, you're on the line.
Hello, Nigel. Well, it doesn't matter. I'm not a Blair, right? Any circumstances. It doesn't matter whether it's Blair saying it or Santa Claus is absolutely right on Brexit. So What are you worried about? What are you actually... Just because he's Prime Minister, he was a former Prime Minister, doesn't make any difference whatsoever. He's an individual.
If the leader of
everybody else.
No, Nick. Here's the point I'm making.
Yes.
No, here's the point I'm making. Here, bear with me.
Yeah.
The Prime Minister has not just got a referendum result behind her, she's got a general election result behind her. And she's going
Irrelevant.
Sorry?
Totally irrelevant. A general election is not a referendum. A general election covers a lot of things.
Plus,
she called it within 13 months, so that makes a complete nonsense.
Well, let me try one more time. The Prime Minister has a referendum result and a general election, and she's going to negotiate with a group of foreign governments and a Brussels-based bureaucracy, and she's negotiating as she sees it. I may disagree, but as she sees it, in the interests of the nation. does it make sense that a former Prime Minister is shuttling back and forth between this country and meeting the very same people, trying to undermine what the British Prime Minister is doing? Is that a reasonable thing to do?
He's not trying to undermine her at all. He's talking sense. He's not trying to collude with anybody.
Hang on. Of course he's undermining her, isn't he? She's made it clear she doesn't support a referendum. He's doing all he can to get us a second referendum. Isn't that making her position virtually impossible?
Well, what's the fundamental problem about wanting another referendum?
Because we've had one, Nick.
Theresa May is undermining herself. Well, anybody can have a referendum and say leave without knowing they have to do anything for the next 2.5 years. Why do you think this has lingered on? Because it's not that simple. Because you can't just leave like that. If we had a proper Leave manifesto in 2016 where all these problems that we're encountering now were on the table, then that would have been different. Yes, it would have been a proper referendum. This is exactly why Blair and many other people within the Conservative Party as well are calling for another referendum. Simply where the issues are on the table.
Right. So you think Blair is right, then, to say we should have a second referendum?
Yes.
Fine, OK. But is he right to go and undermine the Prime Minister who was negotiating with Mr Barnier by going and meeting him repeatedly?
Well, if people think he's undermining the Prime Minister, that's politics. He's not going out deliberately to undermine the Prime Minister. He's putting his views, and he's using his influence as a former Prime Minister who was elected 3 times. I've always said he was the best Conservative Prime Minister, which the Tories never had anyway.
Right, so you think
he's using his...
You think it's legitimate what he's doing?
Yeah, well, it's not illegal, is it?
No, I didn't say.
How many times
say it was illegal. I didn't suggest that. Nick, thank you for texting and calling. You've made the pro-Blair argument. I don't agree with it, but we've heard the argument. But the point is, and Nick's original text saying I was barring pro-Blair callers. I'm not. If you're pro-Blair, 0345 6060 973. Graham is a new caller from Bognor Regis. Good morning, Graham.
Hello, Nigel. Thanks for taking my call.
Now, come on, tell me Blair's a great bloke and he's doing a good job.
No, I'd love to, but unfortunately I agree with a lot of your other callers that the result of the referendum is because of Blair's policies at the start of his premiership.
Yep.
When he just allowed people to walk into our country, like you said, when he gave $7 billion away to the French and this, that and the other. But fundamentally, on the topic of, whether he should be contradicting Theresa May, ultimately, Tony Blair seems to love Europe so much, they should take him to The Hague as a war criminal. I mean, at the end of the day, he took us into a conflict where he didn't have parliamentary backing. We've still got soldiers that are suffering with PTSD.
Graham, there's a huge argument about that. We're not debating that now, although it is ironic to hear Alistair Campbell and others calling the rest of us liars. Graham, thank you for that. Nigel's on the line from Droitwich in Worcestershire. New caller. Good morning.
Good morning, Nigel. I wish to God you were Prime Minister.
Well, that's very sweet of you. Thank you. There's a lot of people in Westminster who are delighted I'm not, because if I was, we'd be out of the European Union by now. But hey, so do you agree with me that Mr. Blair is undermining the Prime Minister's negotiations?
He certainly is.
And how's it taken Theresa so long to stand up and say this?
Well, I think it's about time that somebody stood up to Mr. Blair. He's an arrogant man, and I think he did a lot of damage when he was Prime Minister.
And he's calling for a second referendum, and do you think in the end he might just get that, though?
I hope not. But it's about time somebody stood up to him, and I fully support Theresa May.
Very good. No, I agree with that. Thank you. Moving on, Phil's a new caller from Newcastle under Lyme. Good morning to you.
Morning, Nigel. What a pleasure just to talk to you.
Well, very good to have you
on. Lionel Blair. Tony Blair is nothing but a hypocrite. I mean, I seem to remember when he was in power, he promised the people of this country a referendum on membership of the EU, and then very conveniently didn't.
Yes, I remember that too. So, really, you're not going to listen to what he's got to say?
I have no interest whatsoever what he's got to say.
And do you feel a little bit... I know we shouldn't feel sorry for our leaders, but it is pretty tough for Theresa May, isn't it? Going to Brussels and being undermined by a former Prime Minister meeting the very self-same people.
I agree. I mean, I'm not pleased with what Theresa May has done, but we can well do without meddlers like him.
Yeah, OK, Phil, I'm going to let you go. You mentioned Lionel Blair. He was 90 the other day. I've got time very quickly for one last caller. Sam, a new caller from Ipswich. Good morning, Sam.
Hi, Nigel.
Hello there.
I've told me brief, so I was
Yes.
going to say the best description I ever read, which I think was in the Telegraph about Tony Blair, is that he is the jobby that just won't flush.
Right. Go on. Go on, explain.
You know what a jobby is?
Yeah, go on, explain to the audience, go on.
No, I'm sure it was a Scotsman who wrote it, but I thought it was a good description.
OK, fine, Sam, thank you. And, you know, Tony Blair is a citizen of the world, says it all. His 045 mass immigration policy adversely affected ordinary working-class people. I was a Remain voter, but I'm seriously thinking of voting Leave if we have a second referendum. Good luck. And I tell you, it was that opening of the doors in 2004-5 that allowed those evil Eurosceptics like me to link open borders with bureaucracy in Brussels, and that's why we got the Leave vote. Thank you, Tony Blair. Keep speaking, Tony Blair. You're the best thing for the Leave side ever. I'll be back tomorrow night at 6. At 3 this afternoon, it's Ian Payne. But up next, it's Majid Nawaz.
Thank you, Nigel. Coming up, more than 200 campaigners have written a letter suggesting that the Bank of England should actively seek somebody from an ethnic minority background to appear on its banknotes. Is it time for non-white representation on our banknotes? Before that, some London tube drivers have broken the £100,000 a year pay barrier, overtaking many airline pilots, yet they plan on striking again this weekend. Are striking tube drivers ripping us all off? But first, Theresa May has launched a stinging attack on one of her predecessors, accusing Tony Blair of insulting the British people and the office of Prime Minister by undermining Brexit talks with calls in Brussels for a second referendum. Has Tony Blair got the PM rattled, or should he have stayed out of it?